The UN's top court says countries that fail to protect the planet from climate change could be in violation of international law. In a landmark opinion made at the request of the tiny island nation of Vanuatu, the International Court of Justice said vulnerable nations suffering climate harm could be entitled to reparations. The court's opinion isn't binding, but activists have called it a path to climate justice. For some of the world's tiniest island nations, climate change is an existential threat, with rising sea levels threatening their survival. The Republic of Vanuatu in Oceania is seeking to hold nations with high emissions to account for their impact on the climate. It's called for an advisory opinion from the world's highest court on the legal consequences for countries that fail to prevent climate harms. Today, the ICJ said that the right to a healthy and sustainable environment was equal to other human rights. It said that countries that don't regulate fossil fuel consumption or allow fossil fuel licenses or subsidies may be committing an internationally wrongful act. And it dismissed the argument previously used by polluters that climate agreements allowed them legal protection against being held accountable for climate harms. It's a ruling that opens the way for any vulnerable nation to take polluting nations to court.
In the climate change context, the court considers that each injured state may separately invoke the responsibility of every state which has committed an internationally wrongful act, resulting in damage to the climate system and other parts of the environment.
Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to Cynthia Honyuhi, president of the campaign group Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change, the very group that began the campaign to bring this case to the world's highest court. And I asked what she thinks the ruling means.
This ruling for us really means everything, because we started it off with hope at the start 6 years ago as law students, and now that we're here, the court heard us, and so they upheld the hope and kept the hope going for us. It speaks to that state's obligation in terms of climate change is not just limited to the climate change regime or the Paris Agreement. It goes beyond that in terms of human rights law and international customary law as well. So that's a great basis to stand on. It's a historical ruling.
We live in a time where many international governments, and many powerful ones, do not seem to care too much for a rules-based order and for legal rulings in these sorts of courts. So what difference do you really think it will make? You know, do you really believe we might see a day where small threatened island nations are able to claim compensation from the rich developed world that has caused so much of the climate change?
What the court has done is really affirming what we have always known, and that is accountability has to happen. And if you look at the court's decision and the live proceedings, you could hear that it does not just limit the obligations to parties to arguments, it also applies to non-parties. So the law is the whole body of law applies in this, that's relevant applies in this context. And so even if they are not parties to climate treaties, there are established international customary law that are binding on them as well.
How do you think you go about trying to hold those big polluting nations accountable now in reality in terms of their behavior? You know, because you don't want to wait until it's too late. You want to change their behavior now, don't you?
Yeah. But the thing is, with this advisory opinion, there's so many things that you can use, and it's strong enough that you can use in different spaces that you already have. You have the Vanuatu government thinking about the UNGA. You have the COP conference is coming up as well. And so there's a lot to unpack in it, and we're just initial reaction at the moment. We have to get into the legal analysis of it and see where the straight lies. So at the moment, we are serving that for the unpacking of the many pages that we'll have to read.
And so you don't know yet what the next stage is?
We have some ideas, and it's a work in progress as well, but we want to really dive into the legal analysis to strengthen the way forward. And this is a start of a new journey. It solves climate crisis. This is the basis that we will stand on and start the conversation about accountability. It's a strong basis.
I mean, isn't there a chance that the polluting nations might look at this very cynically and say, you know, we will carry on as we are, and we will worry about the consequences of a long, protracted legal battle in a court in, you know, whose jurisdiction we can question when the time comes. You know, that they can keep putting it off over the horizon and continue to behave as they behave.
Again, have to acknowledge that the court affirmed that there are legal obligations that are not just limited to the climate treaties and climate regimes. So indirectly or directly, countries that are not taking this seriously or not members of these treaties will somehow be obligated, legally binded by some of the agreements as well.
Cynthia Hunyuhi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.